Once more, give rise to bodhicitta, and please listen to the teaching with bodhicitta. So we'll continue where we left off on page 128 of the English translation at the bottom. The results of positive actions. The results of these positive actions can be divided into three: the fully ripened effect, the effect similar to the cause, and the environmental effect. I feel like I've already explained these points, but I guess not. Powers, positive actions. So as for the fully ripened effect, positive actions may be powerful, less powerful, or weak, depending on whether or not in their preparation, acts of execution, and conclusion they've been backed by a positive attitude. So as we discussed this morning, the strength of one's karma, positive or negative, depends on whether they're embraced by the three excellences. But also, not just that, it also depends on whether the karmic act is complete or not, which is to say whether all four factors are complete: the object, intention, action, and fulfillment of that action. Like the object, the person you intend to kill, the wish to kill that person, engaging in the act of killing that person, and then actually succeeding in killing them, in them drawing their last breath. So when we talk about karma, when Buddha taught karma, he taught it in extreme detail, in extensive detail, from top to bottom, beginning to end. All of the different factors and aspects of karma that contribute to different karmic results. And moreover, there are, in terms of what is prohibited, what is allowed and what is not allowed for Buddhist practitioners, followers of the Buddha, it's also contextual. There are certain actions of seemingly negative actions of body and speech that are actually permitted in certain circumstances for Bodhisattva practitioners. So mental non-virtue is never permitted, but certain acts of physical and verbal non-virtue in certain contexts are permitted or even mandatory. And there are many. Anyway, this is explained in detail in the text, and there are lots of stories and anecdotes to illustrate these different points, contexts, dividing lines, and so on. But in short, we can say, as it says here, positive actions may be powerful, less powerful, or weak, depending on whether or not they've been backed by a positive attitude, as well as other factors, such as whether the four factors of object, action, object, intention, action, and fulfillment of action are complete or not. So if one performs a positive action, but to create positive karma that will lead to rebirth in the human or God realms, one just needs positive actions. Virtue doesn't necessarily need to be embraced by the three excellences. But if we want to accumulate merit that is going to act as a seed for liberation and enlightenment to lead us beyond samsara, then our virtuous actions must be embraced by the three excellences: the excellent preparation of bodhicitta, the main part without concepts, and the excellent conclusion of dedication. So, it's to this end that we practice generosity, discipline, and so on. These practices of generosity and discipline and so on are also practiced by non-Buddhist traditions, Christian traditions, and so on and so forth, Muslims and so on. They all have their own way to cultivate the virtue. But just that virtue create merit concordant with liberation? No, it doesn't, because it is not embraced with bodhicitta, not embraced with an understanding of the illusory nature of all things. So it becomes mere ordinary merit. Merit that just ripens in positive samsaric states, basically. It does not lead to the transcendence of samsara. So In that case, weak ordinary merit will lead to rebirth as a human, stronger ordinary merit to rebirth as a god in the desire realm, say, and then, or as a demigod, and then stronger ordinary merit will lead to rebirth as a god in the form and formless realms, these higher states of samsaric existence, like rebirth as Indra, Brahma, and so on and so forth. Gods living in the four formless realms of endless space, endless consciousness, and so on. Or simply speaking, we just say attaining the states of Vishnu, Brahma, and so on. These are gods of the formless realms. They are worldly gods, and they have a lot of great qualities. There's a lot of good things about those gods. They can grant boons and lots of mundane benefits, but they have not transcended samsara themselves. They are still subject to samsara and its sufferings, so the benefit they can grant us is limited. So when it says here, it's taught on page 129, when it said it's taught in the sutras that the most powerful positive acts result in rebirth as a god in the higher worlds, less powerful ones as a god in the world of desire, and weak ones as a human being. We're talking here about positive acts that are not embraced by the three excellences, ordinary positive acts that create just ordinary merit, while acts that are positive but performed with an impure attitude, for example, result in rebirth as a demigod. So the effect similar to the cause, this is the opposite of the effect similar to the cause described earlier for the 10 negative actions. So when we talk about the 10 virtues, in some texts, such as Mipan Rinpoche's Gateway to Knowledge, we find the 10 virtues defined as merely the shunning of the 10 non-virtues. So simply avoiding the 10 non-virtues is said to be the 10 virtues. But in other contexts and other texts is taught that the 10 virtues is not just avoiding the 10 virtues, but in place of, say, the non-virtue of taking life, one actively works to protect life. Instead of one doesn't just avoid harsh speech, for example, but actively makes the effort to speak in a gentle, pleasant way, and so on and so forth. So, in this way, in the scriptures we find mention of the 10 virtues and the 10 special virtues, or exalted virtues. 10 virtues is the mere avoidance of the 10 non-virtues, and the 10 special virtues is on top of that to actively engage in the opposite of the 10 non-virtues, like protecting life, speaking gently, and so on. But just to observe the 10 non-virtues, meaning the 10 virtues, to avoid the 10 non-virtues, that itself is something extraordinary, something extremely beneficial. Like just to avoid taking lives, right? Is so important and so beneficial. If on top of that one can actually put in effort to save lives, like releasing lives as we do in the traditional lice relief practice, then there's even more benefit. So this is a distinction. There's a distinction between the 10 virtues and the 10 special virtues. It's good to know this distinction. So the 10 virtues means basically just avoiding the 10 non-virtues, whereas the 10 special virtues refers to actively putting an effort to engage in positive actions like saving life, being generous, speaking gently, speaking honestly, and so on. And what do these what do these 10 virtues, whether they be the ordinary 10 virtues or special 10 virtues, lead to? Well, by shunning taking life, then I will experience a long life. By shunning stealing and being generous, one will experience riches, and so on and so forth. So this is the role just of the common 10 virtues, just from avoiding the 10 non-virtues, we will reap these benefits. By avoiding sexual misconduct, we'll be free of enemies. Just by avoiding sexual misconduct, whether we be man or woman, the benefit of that is that you'll be free of enemies. The result of just avoiding lying is to encounter praise, to be praised and respected. So likewise, by abandoning the 10 non-virtuous acts of speech, one will experience praise, great renown, pleasant words, and words that are respected. So we see this with some people, like His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Whatever he says, people respect and accept what he said. They accept the veracity of what he says. They take it to heart. They venerate his words. On the other hand, there are some people who, no matter what they say, just people don't believe it. People just don't trust their words, no matter what they say. So this all comes from our past life karma, right? So if you've been very honest, spoken very honestly and gently and so on in your past lives, then your speech will be respected, it will be believed, trusted in this life. But if you've been very dishonest and you've lied, spoken harshly in your past lives, then your speech will not be, it won't be respected. So you can really see this karmic ripening in the lives of different people, right? Like, so like some people up in my homeland, up in Hula, their words just hold a certain gravity and weight. Yeah, their words just hold a weight. People just respect what they say, they listen to what they have to say. So this is the positive karmic ripening of their own honest speech in the past, right? One will have a happy frame of mind, so from being free of, by abandoning covetousness, one will experience a happy frame of mind. One will always be at ease, one won't have difficulty sleeping and so on, as a lot of people do. One will have a burgeoning intellect. So wishes accomplished, a happy frame of mind, that would come primarily from being free of malice and a burgeoning intellect. That's the result of being free of wrong view. These are the 10 effects of virtue similar to the cause. Then we have the environmental effect of the 10 virtues: nourishing grains and effective medicines, good harvests, pleasant surroundings, level land, fertile fields, the grass and trees grow, and so on. Such are the environmental effects of the 10 positive acts. So this is described as the dominant result which ripens in the environment. Like, look at countries like Switzerland, full of beautiful landscapes with very fertile land, temperate climates and so on. Pleasant places to live, healthy, bearing nourishing crops and so on. Where does that come from? Where does such an excellent landscape come from? It comes from positive karma. So all the different characteristics of our external environment as well are karmic ripenings, the result of karma. These are explained in more detail in the words of my perfect teacher and so on, which we could kind of bring in here to add in more detail, but we don't have time to do that. Likewise, in the sutras we find teachings where Buddha, with his inconceivable wisdom and knowledge, he explained, for instance, the karmic causes of the intelligence and qualities of each and every student. For instance, how one of his lay students gathered merit in the past, what are the causes and conditions for them then attaining the state of arhat, what they did in their past lives, what sort of lifetimes they took, what sort of deeds they performed in those lives, what karmic results those led to, how they ended up where they were. We find these incredibly detailed accounts of karmic cause and effect in Buddha's teachings. So again, please do not walk around during the teaching. You need to sit down and stay put. It really disturbs me, it disturbs others. So Buddha Shakyamuni, his knowledge encompassed everything, even the tiniest of details. Through these practices, one is liberated from the hells, the hungry spirits and animals. One will attain abundant happiness, glory and dominion among gods and human beings. Concentrations, such as the concentrations of the gods in the four form and formless realms, boundless attitudes and formless meditations, they will lead one to experience the bliss of Brahma and others. These things we've already talked about. So how does one attain rebirth in the four formless realms? Primarily by training in the four immeasurables, as they're called, the four meditations of Brahma. The meditations of loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and rejoicing. There's another context where these same qualities are taught as the four immeasurables, right? But we need to distinguish between these two, the four qualities of Brahma and the four immeasurables. So when these four qualities of compassion, of loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity are cultivated and meditated upon, then one cultivates the cause for attaining rebirth in the four formless realms. But at this point, these qualities are not immeasurable. So there's another context where these same qualities, loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity, are cultivated in immeasurable ways. And they are thus called the four immeasurables. This is how they're practiced by bodhisattvas, right? Those who have given rise to bodhicitta. So it's important we understand the distinction between these two. It's only those training on the bodhisattva path who train in the four immeasurables. There are non-Buddhist practitioners, worldly people who can cultivate these four qualities of loving kindness, sort of common loving kindness, compassion, and so on, and thereby attain rebirth in the four formless realms. As it says here, the bliss of Brahma and others. An action that's performed with a positive attitude throughout its preparation, actual execution, and conclusion can only be a wholly positive action. On the other hand, actions that are negative in their intention and positive in their application, and actions that are positive in their intention and negative in their application, produce a mixture of happiness and suffering. So, if we take an act of giving, if the act of giving, beginning, middle, and end, and also in terms of the giver, the object given, and the act of the giving are all done with a positive attitude in a positive way, then through and through that is a positive action, positive karma, and will only lead to a 100% positive, fully ripened effect. If, however, one of these factors is a bit compromised, or one is negative or tainted, like maybe your attitude isn't quite so pure, or the object you're giving is very poor, not something of good quality, or you give with prejudice, like you give more to those who you like and less to those you dislike, then your action is compromised in one or more ways, and so the effect is also compromised to some extent. So, as it says in the way of Bodhisattva, when giving, one should give like a seer, like a rishi, which means to give without any prejudice, giving equally without any preference to those who are high or low. so on. So on the other hand, in this way, or on the other hand, actions that are negative their intention and positive in their application. So when the different factors, one's intention, action and so on, are of a mixed nature, like, for example, you perform an act of charity, an act of giving, but the action itself is positive, right, an act of charity, but the motivation with which you perform it is a desire for public esteem. So that's a negative tainted motivation, right? You're doing it for like personal gain. You want respect, you want reputation, you want people to acknowledge that you're a generous person. So this sort of negative actions, selfish motivations, can pollute our positive actions, right? Like you might do something like build a temple or develop a monastery, support a monastic sangha. But if you're doing that tainted by personal aims, like the wish for respect, for reputation, and so on, then what you're doing is a positive action, but that positive action is going to be tainted by your negative intention. So that's one possibility. Then we also have the possibility that your actions are positive in intention but negative in their application, like the story of the captain, story of the bodhisattva who murdered the captain of a ship, because he realized that this captain had the intention to kill all of the passengers on the ship, and would suffer in hell as a result of that negative karma. So with a positive intention, that bodhisattva murdered the captain to save him from his own karma. So that's an example of positive and performing an action that's with a positive motivation, but the action itself is negative. Or as it says here, for example, beating someone or saying unpleasant things to him with a desire to help him, like parents scolding their children, or even hitting their children with a positive intention, the wish to instruct them, to tame them and so on. So in the past, even when I was young, and a lot of us who were young, we would have been hit by our parents. We would have been hit by our parents if we misbehaved and so on. That was their way of disciplining us. And actually sometimes that can be really beneficial, really, really helpful. But these days that's not allowed, right? It's even illegal, especially overseas in countries in many countries, if a child slaps a child or something, and the school or the council hears about it, then they're going to have the police knocking on their door. But that would or could be an example of doing something with a positive intention, doing a negative action with a positive intention. So such actions, which are mixed, produce a mixture of happiness and suffering. Train therefore in accomplishing only positive actions without getting discouraged or weary, like a farmer at work. Train in virtuous actions on a vast scale, courageously and without losing heart, like a brave man going into battle. Train without respite, like a whirling firebrand going round and round, so without break, without rest. Train enduringly and persistently. This is how we should train in virtue. Now thirdly, transforming indeterminate actions into positive ones. So now we're on page 130, right? Indeterminate actions are just neutral actions that we can't say that they're virtuous or non-virtuous, positive or negative, like mending some clothes, sewing some clothes, walking here, walking there. They're neither positive or negative, explicitly positive or negative. If, for instance, you're making circumambulations around the stupa, well, that walking that you're doing is positive because you're walking around the stupa, right? So the action itself is positive. But if you're walking, just say, in a neutral place, like up and down an ordinary street, then that action is neither positive nor negative. It's neutral or indeterminate. So whichever of these we do, they have no real benefit and merely serve to pass the time. It is therefore important to transform them into positive actions. So all of these neutral actions, such as moving about, eating, sitting down, All of these actions, it's vital that they are transformed into positive actions. When I'm doing things like eating and drinking and so on, they don't produce any result. They will not lead me to gain liberation from cyclic existence. They're pointless. What a waste. I will definitely transform them into something virtuous. So, to this end, we find instructions. We're given instructions like when eating, visualize Guru Mache in your throat and visualize your food as an offering to them. When walking around, visualize Guru Mache on your right shoulder or to your right, and think that you're circumambulating him, and so on. So these are precious instructions for transforming all of our neutral actions into virtuous actions, making all our actions meaningful. So these are really important instructions for us to apply. For those who have the Bodhisattva's intention, all their actions, positive or negative, are turned to perfect virtue. Why? On account of that intention. Henceforth, the great and unremitting stream, a strength of wholesome merit, even during sleep and inattention, rises equal to the vastness of the sky. So here, these quotations speak not to the instructions we find in the words of my perfect teacher, instructions like visualizing Guru Mache in your throat when eating and so on, which I just mentioned. Rather, they are talking about the power of bodhicitta to transform all actions night and day into virtue. When you give rise to bodhicitta, aspiration bodhicitta, and application bodhicitta, once such bodhicitta is dawned within your being, then night and day, all of that stream of virtue generated by bodhicitta continues just like an unremitting stream. And when one thinks about this in detail, there's a lot of debate about this in the various scriptures. About from among aspiration and application bodhicitta, which is the most important. Some say aspiration bodhicitta is more important because, after all, our ability to apply bodhicitta, for instance, in actual acts of generosity and so on, is limited. And likewise, there are debates and discussions about the nature of relative and ultimate bodhicitta and so on and so forth. So we won't go into these details here, but as explained in the way of a bodhisattva, relative bodhicitta is comprised of aspiration bodhicitta and application bodhicitta. And what do we mean by aspiration and application bodhicitta? Aspiration bodhicitta is like the wish to go somewhere, and application bodhicitta is like acting on that wish and actually setting out on the journey. So therefore, application bodhicitta is always pervaded by aspiration bodhicitta, but aspiration bodhicitta does not necessarily involve application bodhicitta. You can have the aspiration to go somewhere but not act on it, whereas if you decide to go somewhere, then you have the application, the act of going, and also of course have the wish, otherwise you wouldn't be going, you wouldn't be setting out on your journey, right? So this is, in any case, this and much further detailed discussions about the nature of bodhicitta is found in the scriptures. And as it's said here in the way of bodhisattva and so on, once one is given rise to bodhicitta, all of one's actions night and day are transformed into a stream of virtue. And from the perspective of the Vajrayana, if one has bodhicitta and on top of that has the profound view of the threefold stance of Vajrayana, perceiving all appearances as deity, sounds as mantras, and mental movements as the play of wisdom, then there is no need to mention the even greater benefit of that, the vast waves of virtue that generates. like we cite these famous words of Tedat Lingpa at the end of sessions and so on. We cite sounds and awareness arises, deity, mantra and wisdom and so on. So this is in the Nyingma tradition, these 4 profound lines typically chanted at the end of sessions, and as a result, when most of us hear these verses chanted, immediately we think, oh, now it's the end of the session, it's a pee break, where's the toilet? What we should really be thinking is recalling the nature of reality, the fact that all appearances are the deity and so on, and recalling, sort of bringing to mind that profound view. Of course, these are very high, lofty points of teachings, but these are the points we need to apply. So rather than continuing to be an external observer, turn the vital force of your practice inward and make whatever you do positive and beneficial, carrying it right through to the end. So the vital force means like one's attention, one's life force, one's vital attention. Turn that inwards, turn your focus inwards, and apply yourself so that all of your actions become positive and beneficial. Carrying it through to the end means follow through in what you do. Now we come to a summary of the key points, the 4 truths of origin, suffering, cessation, and path. These 4 truths, which each have 4 further aspects, making a total of 16 factors. So these are vital central points of Dharma, which are explained again and again by the scholars in all contexts. So truth, we're on page 131 now. Truth means something that does not deceive. When we talk about ultimate truth, for instance, ultimate truth means ultimate reality. And in some Jamie Lim's text, he gives us the Sanskrit equivalent for that. And the wish-fulfilling treasury of Longchenpa. We likewise find this etymology, the etymology of ultimate truth. The truth, and indeed truth, means something that does not deceive. There is what we call the truth of cyclic existence, which is that the appearances we perceive as the 3 worlds are results arising independently from their causes, actions or karma, and afflictive emotions. This is what samsara comes from. So samsara is not something produced or fabricated by some other force, by a creator or something, but rather it's the result of one's own karma, one's own afflictions. There are different other beliefs and philosophies that we could say are eternalists, all eternalist beliefs, like the beliefs of Christians, Muslims, and Hindus and so on, who assert a truly existent autonomous creator, like the Almighty Allah and so on. And then there are also other beliefs, philosophies that are nihilistic in their beliefs, but the Buddhist teaching is neither eternalistic nor nihilistic. Rather, Buddha taught that samsara is the result of one's own karma and afflictions. The interdependent, samsara is a risen independence on from the causes and conditions of karma and afflictions. And when explaining interdependence, how things come about in interdependence, and we have the example of anyway, it finds examples used to illustrate this, like I think Rinpoche said, like a seed, and then the various factors. Seed would be the cause, and various factors would be the soil and so on, would be the conditions which help that cause transform into its result, right? So in short, samsara comes about due to the interaction of various causes and conditions, namely karma and afflictions, the karma and afflictions that we ourselves generate. So in this way, samsara appears through the unfailing power of the law of cause and effect. And there is what we call then the sublime truth, which is that through one's efforts aimed at enlightenment, one will, as a result of that cause, attain the state of perfect liberation. So we have the 37 factors of enlightenment, which are practiced on the path. These 37 factors include the 4 applications of enlightenment, the 4 relinquishments, the 8 Eightfold Noble Path, and so on. 37 factors that are practiced on the path to enlightenment. And they begin with the 4 applications of mindfulness, which pertain to the view, which comprise the view. The 4 applications of mindfulness, mindfulness of form, feelings, dharma, and mind. When one trains in, when one applies oneself to these 37 factors, training in these 37 factors aimed at enlightenment, so that acts as the cause. And what does that cause lead to? It leads to the result of enlightenment, the attainment of enlightenment. When we talk about the 37 factors of enlightenment that are practiced on the path, these are practices common to all paths from the Shravaka vehicle on up. So if one trains in these 37 factors of enlightenment, they will act as the cause. They are the cause which leads to the result of Buddhahood. So everything in samsara and nirvana can generally be included in the 4 truths. The origin of suffering, cessation, and the path. There's nothing anyone seeking liberation needs to practice that's not included in these 4 truths. So those who are seeking liberation and enlightenment, what do they need to do? What do they need to practice? They need to practice the 4 truths. So practice the 4 truths means these 4 truths, as explained in Jimanimi's commentary on his Treasure of Precious Qualities, they can be explained at the level of ground, path, and fruition. So, just pointing out, this is the origin, this is suffering, and so on, that is to understand the 4 truths at the level of the ground. I guess we could say understanding the nature of these 4 truths, and then to understand that the origin needs to be known, the suffering needs to be abandoned, cessation needs to be attained, and the path needs to be cultivated. This is the 4 truths at the level of the path, and so on. So these points are explained in great detail, profound detail, in Jigme Rinpoche's Treasury of Precious Qualities and his own auto-commentary on that text, as well as the commentaries by, I think, Rinpoche said Kimbo and Gyatso, and so on. There are some who mistakenly think that the Nyingma teachings don't contain explanations of the 4 truths. This is completely wrong. So first of all, let's look at the truth of the origin. Although the actual condition of the ground is beyond expression, it is inexpressible, ineffable, inconceivable. Four Truths can be explained at the level of the Shravakas, the Mahayana, the level of the greater vehicle, more specifically from the perspective of Madhyamaka and so on. So here it says, although the actual condition of the ground is beyond expression, beyond describable and inconceivable. So here Drusha Rinpoche, being a great perfection master, is explaining them from quite a high perspective. So the actual condition of the ground is the indivisibility of samsara and nirvana, this indescribable, inconceivable, ineffable state. It is emptiness. This is the basic ground, the basic nature of all things. That is the basic nature of all things, but we fail to recognize that state on account of innate ignorance. We have innate ignorance, imputed ignorance, and so on. Innate ignorance is sort of maybe not appropriate or necessary to explain it here, but at the same time it's important to explain it. So when appearances first arise from the ground, it's a bit like when those appearances are not recognized for what they are, then one falls into what we call co-emergent ignorance. So Samantabhadra recognizes ground appearances for what they are and is simultaneously liberated. And by failing to recognize the nature of those appearances, sentient beings fall into co-emergent ignorance and perceive ground appearances mistakenly as subject and object. They perceive this basic distinction, fall into co-emergent ignorance, and that then proliferates, develops into grosser dualistic thoughts such as me, them, subject and object, me, my friends, my country, and so on. Basic whole samsaric experience as we know it. So we can also understand this basic delusion as taught in the Madhyamaka teachings, where it said, for instance, first we conceive of me, then mine, in relation to that, others and theirs. And with this basic mistaken delusion, the wheel of samsara turns round and round. Or as Mipa Rinpoche says, as long as there's conception of the aggregates, for that long there will be conception of self, and for that long rebirth and samsara will continue. So this is also how delusion comes about and how it is perpetuated. So because of the ignorance of artificial imputation, so we first of all we have innate ignorance, and then imputed ignorance and co-emergent ignorance, like I said. Because of this we make distinctions, self and other, me, mine, and so on and so forth, and consider the aggregates to be a self. This is actually the very root of samsara, this mistaken perception of the aggregates as a self. This is the basis of the conception of a self, of an I, which is the root of all delusion, the root of samsara and suffering. And where does this conception of self come from? Well, it's rooted in the aggregates. With reference to the aggregates, we perceive a truly existent self in our personal aggregates, our form and so on. But if we actually look for a so-called me, like my name, Pema Rixel, or I have several other names as well. I have this instinctively identify myself with my aggregates, my body, and so on, my personal continue of experience. But if I actually examine, interrogate this presumption and ask, where is Pema Rixel? Is it in my body? Which part of my body? My mind? Which part of my being? I cannot find it anywhere. So our conception of a self, identifying a self, seeing a self in the aggregates, is completely mistaken and baseless. And yet this is the conception that we have and the basis of samsara. So we have this instinctive sense of self, deluded as it is, and this then generates afflictions, because as soon as we have a sense of I, then together with that we have attachment to me and mine, and then what comes from that is also aversion to others and theirs, and then from that come all other shades of emotion. These all generate karma, and karma generates the experiences of samsara, and so the wheel continues to turn. Once we start considering the aggregates to be a self, attachment arises in relation to things that agree with us, aversion arises in relation to things that don't agree with us, and so on. In dependence on these 3 poisons, the 5 poisons come into being. So we have the basic 3 poisons of attachment, aversion, and ignorance, which then proliferate into or can be described in greater detail in terms of the 5 poisons, the 3 poisons plus pride and jealousy, and these can be divided up or understood in much greater detail, as we find in the teachings, the Abhidhamma and so on, where we find enumerations of dozens of different types of aversion, affliction, different shades of jealousy, pride, stinginess, and so on and so forth. There are, in short, hundreds of different shades of emotion. From these, all actions, all karmas are produced, just as from the earth and summer, which is the source of all that grows. So just as crops and plants grow from the earth, likewise the experience of samsara grows from our karma, which is generated by the afflictions. Actions are of many different kinds, positive, negative, indeterminate, and so on. But those that propel us in cyclic existence can be condensed into 3: non-virtuous, virtuous, and unwavering. Unmoving acts, unmoving karma, can refer, sometimes explained as being the state of meditation, meditative absorption, the karma generated by meditative absorption, which leads to rebirth in the higher realms, the form and formless realms of gods. Of these, the first throw us into the lower realms, the second take us to happy states in the world of desire, and the third lead us to the 2 higher worlds of form and formlessness. So every day I do 2 hours of preparation for the following day's teaching, and in the afternoon I'm busy with people coming to see me and so on. So in the morning I get up at 3 o'clock to prepare for the teachings. And when I do my preparation, I note down the stories that I think will be appropriate to tell at different points, stories and anecdotes and so on. So I really do try and prepare very diligently, and do my best to explain as best as I can. So I do my best to prepare and explain to the best of my ability. I know there are many very learned people here, and not just that, but so many a great audience here who've come to receive these teachings. So I really do my best. I take it seriously, but that said, my knowledge and my own ability is limited, so sometimes I make mistakes, or sometimes there are things I can't explain so clearly. So there are probably lots of things that I don't know and that I'm not able to explain. But so if there are points I can't explain, it's not because I'm not taking care or I'm not taking the teaching seriously. I really am taking it seriously and trying my best, but sometimes there's things I just don't know, and so therefore I just cannot explain. So as I said, I did receive teachings on this text from my late father, but I was young then. and from Kyabje Jujun Rinpoche, but I was 14 then, so still very young. So I don't have such a clear memory of those teachings. But as I'm going through teaching this text, I'm trying also to bring in my understanding of the words of my perfect teacher, which I received from Khyentse Daso Rinpoche twice. The different categories of these actions have been explained above. And indeed, there are so many different categories of karma. When you really go into karma in detail, there are so many different categories and types and aspects of karma. And these are taught in the scriptures in tremendous detail. In the Treasury of Abhidharma, I'm pretty sure it's in the Treasury of Abhidharma, or the collection of Abhidharma. It talks about how one karma can ripen over the course of many lifetimes, or a single lifetime, or 2 lifetimes, and so on. It talks about the duration over which karma ripens, and so on. So much detail. There are literally hundreds of treatises explaining karma in the Buddhist tradition. So when we talk about karma, as it's taught in the Buddhist teachings, we're talking about something incredibly vast and detailed. It's a really deep and vast topic. You could study karma for 17 years and still not have got to the bottom of it. There are a great wealth of texts, and indeed people continue to compose new texts. Khyentse Daso Rinpoche would say, though, these days, for the Nyingma tradition at least, there is no need to compose any texts. We have the profound teachings of the omniscient Jigme Lingpa and Longchenpa, of Mipa Rinpoche, Rongsom, and so on. These are perfect stainless treatises. To try and add anything by composing new treatises is just a waste of paper and ink. What more is there to add to the profound words of these great masters? You'd just be basically plagiarizing what these great masters have already written and mixing it all together. There's literally nothing you can add to the words of these great masters. It's like these new compositions are like the provisions of a beggar, or the provisions of a thief, who goes around stealing a handful of barley flour when they can, a handful of wheat flour here and there, a handful of millet flour, a handful of grain, mixes it all together, and then what does he end up with? A sack of, you don't even know what to call it. It's not barley, it's not wheat, it's not this, it's not that. So, to try and compose text these days is just like that. You just be plagiarizing a bit from here, a bit from there, and ending up with nothing much. And what worth are compositions like that? This is what Khyentse Daso Rinpoche said. That said, Yangtang Rinpoche then said to me, he really encouraged me to compose a text. He said, you must write, you must compose, Rinpoche. And I said, but Khyentse Daso Rinpoche and Khyentse Jigme Rinpoche said it's no use to compose text these days. And Yangtang Rinpoche said, He said, yes, but you really should compose something. It'd be really excellent if you were to write something. It would certainly please me, he said. But Yang Rinpoche said, if and when you do compose something, it should really be following and upholding your own tradition, your tradition, and really highlight the features of that tradition. And the composition should have some special, unique qualities that really highlight the qualities of one's own tradition. Instead of so many of the compositions that are being composed by contemporary writers these days, where people have some learning and they say, compose a new commentary, one of the major treatises, and they just explain the words, and drawing from existing writings of Gorampa and different masters of different traditions, and it ends up kind of just a mix and match. So it doesn't really highlight or uphold any particular tradition. It's just a mixture of everything, and it really doesn't add anything, or it ends up kind of neither this nor that. So those of you who are scholars and might be considering composing things, you should think about these points. These days, especially if you plagiarize, people find out straight away because everything's digitalized. So you can find out where things are sourced really quickly. Like these days, people use AI. You read about students using AI to write their essays and stuff. And to write their essays and papers, but then their students have found out and they get failed, right? So it's not okay to just plagiarize and copy the words of others. So I say this with reference mainly to those who might be considering composing texts themselves. You hear quite alarming things these days. People also doing research, saying they're researching things like Vimala Mitra's tantric teachings, or the Tantra praising the names of Manjushri and so on. Is there really anything to be researched about these profound teachings, these stainless, faultless teachings? It's a pretty... There's really no benefit in researching in this kind of skeptical academic way these profound teachings. I don't think anything can be gained from that. Padamba Sangye says, page 132, when afflictive emotions rise, if you don't bring the antidote to bear, people of Dingri will have lost the whole reason for the Dharma. So if you don't apply the antidotes when the afflictions arise at that very moment, that crucial moment, then the whole point of the Dharma is lost. If you chant your Mani mantra, your Vajraguru mantra, but when anger arises, when desire arises, you don't apply the antidote and don't tame your emotions at that moment, then the whole point of all your practice, all of your many recitations is lost. It all becomes futile. So now the truth of suffering. While the origin or cause is actions related to the afflictive emotions, the 3 and 5 poisons, their result is wandering in the 3 worlds, desire, form and formlessness, constantly weakened and tormented as we ceaselessly experience the deeds and sufferings of the 6 classes of beings, the hell beings, agregos, animals, and so on. There's no sweet fragrance in a swamp of filth, no happiness likewise in the 6 realms. So the suffering of the 3 worlds and 6 classes we discussed in previous days. No coolness is there in a pit of blazing coals, and nowhere in existence, nowhere in cyclic existence is there any joy. There is no happiness to be found in samsara, just like the words of Genjin Chiba, which I recite all the time, which I'm reciting all the time. From afar, it looks like people might look happy, but everyone has their personal suffering. Whether they be rich or poor, high or low, they all have their own shade of suffering. There's no one who's free of suffering. Rich people, leaders, the powerful, there is no special happiness to be found, even if you attain those states. Yeah, they look different. It's a different situation, but it's not a situation immune to suffering. Everyone suffers, just in different ways. No one is immune. Even the richest person in the world, they're still suffering. Maybe they can't sleep at night, they're anxious, they have to take sleeping pills in order to get some rest. No one's immune to suffering. In short, although the nature of all beings' mind is clear light, luminosity, which is the essence of Buddhahood, so again, Shushiramushi is speaking from a very profound viewpoint here. As taught in the sutra teachings, mind is by nature luminosity, but nevertheless it's become obscured by the adventitious stains of incorrect thinking. Incorrect thinking, so thinking or perception that is not in accord with reality, seeing that which is white as yellow and so on. Misinterpretation of reality, you could say. Motivated by thoughts of this kind, beings indulge in tainted deeds, thus producing the aggregates, constituents, and sense and fields of cyclic existence. There's so many quotations from the scriptures, like the Mahasiddha Saraha's teachings, which we could recite here to clarify the same point. In the Sublime Continuum, the Uttara Tantra, it said, improper use of the mind gives rise to actions and afflictive emotions. Like it's taught in the Treasury of Dharma so incredibly clearly, when you have not abandoned habitual tendencies, when you encounter an object, and when you have incorrect thinking, when these 3 things come together, then karma and the afflictions ensue, to paraphrase. Likewise in the Jugaland it said, from negative actions come all suffering, and likewise all the lower realms. From positive acts come all the higher realms and constant happiness. So this is the very same point that we discussed previously. The fact that from negative actions come all suffering in the lower realms, from positive actions come all higher realms and all happiness. Remind yourself, therefore, of the defects of psychic existence described earlier, so that you feel a strong inclination to perform positive actions. Reflect, remind yourself on all of the sufferings of the 3 lower realms, of the hell beings and so on, as well as the suffering of the higher realms, and inspire yourself to perform positive actions, and thus inspired, try to practice them as much as you can. If my acts are good, sincerely intended, then no matter where I turn, the merit gained will honor me with its resulting benefits. So now we've covered the truth of the origin of suffering, and the truth of suffering. The cause and effect of samsara. Now we come to the truth of the path and the truth of cessation. There there's so much to say about the truth of the path, the different stages and levels of the path to be traversed, but we won't go into these details here. Well, the causal condition for the path is the Buddha nature, Tathagata Garba. So there are 4 aspects to the truth of the path when we divide the 4 truths up into their 4 aspects, making a total of 16. Then the truth of the path is defined as the path, the family, accomplishment, and definitive emergence. So here the dominant condition, the causal condition for the path is Buddha nature, the fact that beings have Buddha nature. The dominant condition is encountering a sublime teacher, and the path comes about through practicing their teachings. So encountering a sublime teacher. So this is an indispensable condition for accomplishing the path. In my case, primarily encountering my root gurus, Khenpo Daze Rinpoche and Khenpo Chökyi Rinpoche. It's because of their kindness that I'm able to sit here and explain the teachings to some extent. Because the path comes about through practicing his or her teachings, so putting into practice, internalizing that which we receive from our teachers. One time Khenpo Daze Rinpoche, it was Khenpo Daze Rinpoche who told me to go and study with Khenpo Chökyi Rinpoche, and when I first did, I received so much scoldings. It was like for several days my face was just completely red and raw from all the scoldings. So I met some 2 or 3 monks from Derge. Anyway, they there was a kind sponsor I met in Singapore and then Taiwan. She took us to lunch with 2 or 3 monks from Derge or come. Usually I don't go to these sorts of dinners with lots of other monks and people, but anyway, I ended up at such a lunch. And they said, almost like teasing us, I hear that Khenpo Chökyi Rinpoche, he used to make you guys go out and get his firewood and stuff. Like kind of teasing me about that. And I said, yeah, absolutely. A few times I did have the opportunity to go and gather firewood for my teacher Khenpo Chökyi Rinpoche, and likewise to wash his pots, to make his tea and so on. A few times we got that opportunity and I was so delighted. And sometimes I got to clean his hut and sweep his floor and so on. Likewise, Khenpo Chökyi Rinpoche's main student, he would also do the same. He'd go out and gather firewood, whole like big heavy loads of firewood for Khenpo Chökyi Rinpoche and do the same. So Khenpo Sherab, this main student of Khenpo Chökyi Rinpoche, who's now like as well known as Khenpo Tsudrum Lodro and so on, even he would go out to gather firewood for our teacher Khenpo Chökyi Rinpoche and wash his pots and so on. So of course I would do that. So I was delighted. to have those opportunities. And in any case, Khenpo Chögyam Rinpoche would never let any of his students kind of maintain any kind of conceit or pride, to like place themselves above doing these menial tasks. Anyway, these monks kind of brought this up. They said, "Oh, we heard that you had to do these menial tasks as if it was something bad to do or something lowly." And I responded, "Well, yeah, I got the opportunity to do those things for my teacher. I was so delighted." Khenpo Chögyam Rinpoche was completely uncompromising. He would not allow a drop of pride or conceit to remain in his students. He would say if someone is proud and arrogant and puts themselves up on a higher seat, well, then they're not a fit student, they're not a fit vessel, and he would not let them hang around. So he was completely uncompromising teacher, and he would, if he saw pride in a student, he would scold that student, point that out and scold that student, no matter who they were, chukus or whoever, even Chugo Kankar and so on. She mentioned a few names. It's also really important that we respect our root gurus, teachers. So our root gurus. It's not okay just to say like, "Oh, I have faith in you, my teacher. You're my root guru. I'm not interested in your teachers." Like someone once said to me, "Oh, I have faith in you, Rinpoche, but Dodo Rinpoche, who's one of my root gurus, Dodo Rinpoche I'm not interested in." Like, how is that acceptable? Where do you think I get my the teachings I share with you? Where do you think they come from? They are the teachings of my root gurus. So one's gurus must be revered and treasured, just as you treasure your own root guru. So who is one's gurus? Who were the predecessors? Who were the lineage masters? You need to know that. And you need to respect those previous masters. Otherwise, if you're my student but you don't know who my teachers are, you don't know who Khenpo Daso Rinpoche is, who Khenpo Chögyam Rinpoche is, well, that's pretty embarrassing. That's not okay. Every morning, who do we supplicate? We supplicate every day. Patrul Rinpoche, Mikon Rinpoche, Dujun Rinpa, Dujun Rinpoche, Khenpo Daso Rinpoche, and so on. Because they are our teachers and our teachers' teachers, right? So this is really important. With his wisdom accompanied by skillful means is the path, skillful means accompanied by wisdom is the path. The path, in brief, is to fully recognize suffering, to abandon the origin of suffering, to realize cessation, and to follow the path of meditation. This is, in short, the essence of the path. To fully recognize suffering, to abandon the origin of suffering, to realize cessation, and to follow the path. It's by energetically and single-mindedly training in the general and specific stages of the path that comprise the Buddhist doctrine, matching them to one's individual capacity, that one will gradually travel the path of accumulation and so on all the way to the end, to the state of Buddhahood. For the actual attainment of the result depends on personal practice. What does it say in the sutras? If you don't actually internalize the teachings, if you don't put them into practice yourself, then it's just like looking at the reflection of food in a mirror. You cannot eat it, right? It's not going to fill your stomach. Or it's like a deaf person playing the guitar. They might be able to play really beautifully, but they can't enjoy the music. Or like looking at the reflection of food in a mirror. You cannot eat it, you cannot fill your stomach. Or like sitting in a boat but not having an oar. You can sit in that boat for a year, but you're not going to get anywhere, right? In the sutras, these examples are given to illustrate the fact that in order to attain the result of practice, you need to actually practice. Then we have the truth of cessation. The ground in which everything in cyclic existence ceases is emptiness. All phenomena, samsaric phenomena, come to cease in the basic state of emptiness. This is the actual condition of all phenomena, the absolute nature, thusness, completely free of all conceptual extremes such as existence, non-existence, and so on. Like the lines we recite from the root stanzas of Nagarjuna all the time, free of beyond birth, beyond arising, cessation, eternalism, nihilism, and so on. Or as Dujanimpa described it, appearance is the display of the ground beyond reality, and so on. This is the absolute nature, the ultimate truth. Beyond all elaborations, extremes, complexities, there is nothing greater, nothing further to realize than this. This is the absolute nature, the state of emptiness, which pervades all other phenomena. The absolute nature and phenomena are not separate entities, but since the uncompounded and absolute nature and compounded phenomena are incompatible in their characteristics, neither are they a single entity. All phenomena are beyond extremes, beyond concepts. That is their ultimate nature. This is the nature of all phenomena. The unchanging absolute space that transcends the extremes of eternalism and so forth is emptiness. So this is what must be realized. By practicing the path that leads to the realization of that emptiness, all paths motivated by the truth of the origin cease, and one attains the result. So this is what we need to do. By practicing the path, we need to abandon the origin, the 3 and 5 poisons, and thereby suffering will naturally pacify, will naturally cease, will naturally be uprooted. In short, the afflictive emotions and their seeds that cover awareness fade and subside into the absolute space and are thus eliminated. So previously, when explaining karmic cause and effect, just earlier in this chapter, Kyabje Drujun Rinpoche was explaining from the perspective of the sutra teachings, the vehicle of characteristics, and now we've suddenly risen to the level of the great perfection, a much higher, so to speak, perspective. The state of elimination is the primal wisdom of emptiness, the ground of cessation. This is the extraordinary truth of cessation, what we call the attainment of liberation and nirvana. When we talk about cessation, there are many different types of cessation, or this can be defined in different ways. Cessation, the basic state of phenomena. So when the causes of the 3 rounds of samsara are brought to a halt, come to cease, that is the state of cessation. When all obscurations are brought to a halt, are uprooted, that is the state of cessation. When they're brought to a halt and undone in the basic space of phenomena, that is cessation. Thus it has been taught that the nature of the truth of suffering is the truth of cessation, and so on. Let us illustrate this with an example. Indulging in unwholesome food and behavior that makes one ill is the origin. So this is an example that makes it easier for us to understand. Eating bad food that makes you sick is like the origin. Then getting sick from the food is suffering. Being careful about one's diet, listening to what the doctor says, is the truth of the path. This is a really important point, just on a more mundane context. If you're sick and you go to see the doctor, it's not enough just to go and see the doctor, pay their expensive fees and get the medicine from them. You need to really follow their advice. Do what they say. Otherwise, how can you expect to recover? And there was another perfect teacher. Pacha Rinpoche says, basically says, when it comes to practicing the Dharma, you have to do it carefully, you have to do it cautiously. You can't be all blasé about it. So, like with me, I suffer from diabetes, but I really follow my doctor's advice to the dot. And when I went for my recent checkup, he said, your sugar levels are now down to 0. If you carry on as you are, you might even recover from diabetes, or your sugar levels can remain at 0, remain at normal. Curing the illness and returning to good health is the truth of cessation. Here now is an analogy of this example. Miserliness and preventing others from being charitable is the origin of suffering. Some people are really so miserly, so stingy. It's like pitiful to see them. Poverty and deprivation is suffering. The suffering that stems from that origin, making offerings and gifts of charity, is the truth of the path, and being consequently rid of future suffering from poverty is the truth of cessation. So this is how you should understand and apply the process of cause and effect. Having thus reflected on the manner in which causes unfailingly give rise to effects, you should perform all kinds of positive actions and abandon all forms of negative action. Never do anything harmful, whether on your account or anyone else's. Even for the sake of your teachers or the three jewels, it's wrong to do negative actions. It's not they who will receive the fully ripened effect of such deeds, it's their allotted fate. As letter to a friend tells us, perform no evil, and so on. Even for the sake of Brahmins, monks, and so on, for no share they'll take of its eternal fruit. When death arrives, those evil acts will show. Their fruit, whatever it may be, will be revealed. These quotations, these lines of teaching are so precious and so rich with meaning. We could spend the whole day just looking at this quote. So what is Nagarjuna saying here? He's saying, perform no evil, perform no invirtue, even for the sake of others, Brahmins, monks and gods, or honored guests, not even for your father, your mother, your queen, or your court. Do not perform non-virtue for others, because the result of those non-virtues will ripen on you. They might not ripen immediately, like a sword impaling you, but when death arrives, your negative karma will ripen. So in the future, your karmic ripen will be sure to ripen. In the past, Kimbo Daso Rinpoche at his home monastery, Rahom Monastery, it seems he was a very powerful man, a very rich man. Very rich and powerful. And there was a very renowned and a great Mama there, Dzogchen master there at Rakhos. And this powerful man, he said, he requested this great master to come to his house and do puja for him, and perform what we call a yanguk, summoning of good luck. Because so it seemed this man, he was very powerful, but he wasn't very wealthy. And actually, really, you need wealth and power, both, right, in a mundane sense. So but the point is that if one doesn't have the necessary karma, you cannot experience the results of that karma, right? Like without the cause, you can't experience the effect. So there's a story of a practitioner in the past who propitiated Damshin Doji Lekpa, this great protector, and actually was able to like see him and talk with him in person. And this practitioner was very poor, so he relied on alms and donations from others. One day he went to receive some soup, and he received like a chunk of meat in his soup, actually a chunk of fat. And later he said to the Damshin Lepa, he said, you said you were going to give me a city, but I haven't received this city. And Damshin Lepa said, Doji Damshin Lepa said, well, what about the soup you got the other day? There was a lump of fat in it, wasn't there? That was your city. So this practitioner didn't have enough merit to receive more city than that, right? So So just like that, this powerful man in Rahur invited this accomplished master to his house to do a summoning of good luck. And this master was extraordinarily accomplished. Like there's stories of him when giving a long life empowerment, reading through the empowerment manual, and then looking for the long life vase or the next kind of ritual item he needed, and the deities or protectors, like the vase actually like levitating into space and like just being placed into his hand, amazing things like that happening. He was no ordinary master. So he went at invitation to this experience, to this powerful man's house, this man who was powerful but not rich, right? And he performed the Yanguk, the summoning of good luck. But even with all his accomplishment and power and realization, still he could not summon good luck for this man. He couldn't fulfill his wish and give him the wealth he required. Why? Because the man himself did not have the karma for enjoying wealth, right? He didn't have the merit. He hadn't accumulated the positive karma to experience the positive result. So this is to say that it all depends on one's own karma. Even a great realized accomplished master cannot give us something we don't have the karma for. We have to accumulate, we have to sow the seeds ourselves. So as it says, it's you alone who have to give up negative actions, and you alone who have to undertake positive ones. There's nothing anyone else can do to take your place and help you out. So, when it comes to composition, so the great there was a Tibetan who went to Pema Usodong Lingpa, Kinsi Wampo, and he was all dressed up in fine robes with his hair tied up on the top of his head, and he went to Khyentse Wangpo and said, "I'm a treasure revealer, please look at my the treasure punishment I've revealed that shows the treasures I'm destined to reveal," and so on. And Chairman Khyentse Wangpo then said, rather than asking me, please go and ask Chairman Ngondro Dutai. So this man who claimed to be a Terten, a treasure revealer, said to Ngondro, you know, I'm a Terten, so basically, Tertans are given a sort of equivalent of like an address that shows them where the treasures are destined to revealed lie. And the Tertan asked Ngondro Lodrotai for some help with this, and Lodrotai, in response, composed a verse that explained in very like poetic 4 lines where his destined treasure lied in this mountain, in this area, and so on. And then the treasure revealed, this man who said he was going to be who claimed to be a Tertan, was so happy. He thought, oh, this is great, now I'll just go off. I'll go off and reveal my treasure, and I'll do this in front of everyone and prove that I'm a treasure revealer. He went off to Derge. Thankfully, he went off to Derge, where they had the big printing house. And thankfully he showed the verse that Ngondro had written and given to him to someone quite learned before he went any further. And I can't translate this word for word, but basically Ngondro had written a very kind of poetic verse of poetry, using lots of metaphors and similes. It sounded very impressive on the outset. You know, it seemed like it was saying, in this mountain flank, in this cave, and so on, where wind blows and so on. And he thought it was like a real address, you know, a location of his destined treasure. But then he showed it to someone more learned, who just burst out laughing. And the self-proclaimed treasure revealer said, "Why are you laughing?" And the person said, "This is a joke, he's making fun of you." Basically, the verse was saying, just making fun of the treasure revealer and saying, "You'll find your treasure in your arse where your farts resound." So anyway, that's the funny story. And sorry, I'm struggling to keep up with the story and the anecdotes, but kind of what I mean to say here, Rinpoche says, is that if one chooses to compose something, one needs to be careful about it. And I think Rinpoche also mentioned like making corrections to texts. It's not enough just to be able to compose pretty verses and poetic text. It needs to be relevant, and it needs to be meaningful, and so on and so forth. And there were some other funny anecdotes in that vein. So we have this quotation from a letter to a friend, and then, so applying all the teachings on the workings of cause and effect, your own stream of being, practice adoption and avoidance correctly, and thus do whatever you can to make this life meaningful. Thinking that I might be able to do so, precious teacher, in you I put my trust. Thinking that, pray earnestly as follow, positive and negative actions ripen unfailingly. So these 4 lines are from the liturgy, the Ngondro liturgy itself. So we recite these during our preliminary practice. Positive and negative actions ripen unfailingly. May I be skillful and disciplined in adopting good and shunning evil. As I pray to you, precious teacher, bless me, incomparably kind Lord. So with these words, we supplicate that we may be able to observe karma correctly. So when we talk about a good teacher or a proper teacher, then they need a good teacher is someone who observes karmic cause and effect, who has taken impermanence and death to heart, who acknowledges the value of the precious human birth, who is vividly aware of the shortcomings of cyclic existence, who has taken these 4 mind changings diligently to heart, who is guided by these 4 mind changings. Otherwise, just being dressed up in the robes, wearing a white and red shawl, or what have you, that's of no benefit. It doesn't mean anything if these 4 mind changings haven't been taken to heart. So please keep that in mind. So what I'm saying here during these teachings is not my own ideas, my own words. I'm just explaining Jujun Rinpoche's own words, what he himself taught and said. If we, as Jujun Rinpoche says right here, if we fail to acquire some genuine feeling for these 4 common preliminary practices, these 4 mind changings, all the practice we do in the generation, perfection phases, deity practice, and so on, will do no more than reinforce the 8 ordinary concerns, our 8 mundane preoccupations, and the Dharma will be of no benefit. So, if you don't take these 4 mind changings to heart, and then you just boast about having done the Ngondro, having done this generation stage practice, this completion stage practice, Jekcha and Turgal and what have you. But all the time your 8 worldly concerns, your attachment to the 8 worldly concerns is just increasing, well then the Dharma is of serving no benefit to you. Nowadays we all boast that we're Dharma practitioners, but we haven't severed our attachment to the things of this life. We have not turned our minds away from psychic existence. We haven't relinquished even the smallest of our desires for our friends, relations, entourage, servants, food and clothes, pleasant conversation and the like. In the past, someone said to me, there was this practitioner I knew, I better not to mention his name, but anyway, this person said, this practitioner so-and-so, he devoted his whole life to practice, he was in retreat the whole time, but when it comes down to it, I don't think he was really a good practitioner. I don't think he'd really taken the Dhamma to heart. I said, why? What do you mean? And the person said, well, even at the end of his life, he was still so attached to his relatives, so attached to his grandchildren. So, well, who knows, but if you remain attached to your grandchildren, your family, your wealth and so on, then it really doesn't matter how much practice you've done. It doesn't matter if you're a direct disciple of Seta Rinpoche, Delgye Rinpoche, Dujin Rinpoche, what have you. It hasn't made much of a difference to you, has it? As a result, any positive actions we undertake are not really effective. Our minds and the Dharma go different ways. We manage to find fault in others while failing to consider our own defects. So, like I'm sitting here, I might be sitting here pointing out these faults, giving these instructions to you guys, but if I don't apply them to myself, then I'll fall prey to this fault, right? Finding fault in others while failing to consider our own defects. So I know we're running a bit over time today. I'll continue and just down through the next 2 paragraphs so that we finish finish this section. It's really not such a big deal if sometimes we run over, go a few minutes late. It's no big problem if the lunch break is a little shorter. It's okay to eat lunch a few minutes later than planned. The most important thing is to get through the text, right? That's after all why we are here, to study this Ngondro commentary. We become puffed up with pride at the smallest good quality in ourselves. We become so proud at the fact that we've done 3-year retreat, that we've done this and that practice, that we've finished our Kshetra studies. So we might look like we're practicing Dharma, but from another side we're just practicing mundane values, worldly values. So if you're more involved in worldly activities than Dharma activities, then it goes without saying that you are never, there's no end for you, there is no end in sight to samsara if you're still prioritizing mundane things over the Dharma. Our minds are distracted by honors and entertainments. We get involved in pointless conversations and all sorts of different activities. The learned and accomplished beings of the past, so jumping down to the next paragraph, the learned and accomplished beings of the past used to say that the preliminaries are even more profound than the main practice. So in Jigten Rinpoche's Mountain Dharma and so many teachings of the great masters of the past, it is said again and again, the preliminaries are even more profound than the main practice, which is to say that without trading in the preliminaries, taking them to heart and being transformed by the preliminaries, one will not be able to practice the main one will not be able to engage in the main practice. The main practice will not come to fruit. What they meant was that the root of the Dharma depends on relinquishing the things of this life. So rather than looking outside ourselves, we should make an effort to blend our minds and the Dharma inside ourselves. When it says relinquishing the things of this life, it doesn't necessarily mean literally physically giving away everything you own and so on. It means relinquishing attachment to the things of this life. It's our attachment that binds us, right? So it's our attachment that we need to relinquish. This is, and as it says, we need to blend our minds with the Dharma. As Khenpo Daso Rinpoche would say, by practicing Dharma, we should be transformed, just like a piece of white felt being soaked in red dye. The white felt becomes a deep red. It's completely soaked through with red color, completely transformed. At the very least, by practicing, we should take on a red hue. Like we need to be affected and transformed, at least to some extent. If we're completely untouched, like the white felt that just remains completely white, then it's absolutely no use. At that time, we'll remember our teacher's compassion and kindness devotion will automatically well up in us. It's thus that all the qualities of the path will spontaneously and effortlessly emerge. So, to backtrack, when a few good qualities related to the Dharma appear within us, we'll understand how profound these instructions are, and our confidence in the Dharma will grow. And at that time, as a result, we'll remember our Guru's compassion and kindness, and devotion will automatically well up in us. When devotion wells up, then the blessings can automatically enter. Devotion is like the open gateway. It's when we have devotion, then the blessings can enter us automatically. And thus the qualities of the path will spontaneously and effortlessly emerge. This completes the brief explanation of the 4 practices that cultivate the field of one's mind stream and turn one's thoughts away from cyclic existence. Now we dedicate the merit and stop here for today.
Tuje gonji yije toge dage yingla yirdo jene yanchin ge labju sedan sonam tenra pembele dimi yangun dawa dar benje samjir debe midam memen so barje dele gerve tambar wasawan da songombo tuje gonji yije toge dage yingla yirdo jene yanchin ge labju jodong ojo dani kanto neve jodo drimi je gavem tajav trashi ge zanawa gombo yije toge ban wasawan da songombo jambe yang tuje gonji Shingi labji chodong ojo